Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Just waiting for Tisa to come in live as well.
Here I am.
Hi, good evening, Tisa, on your side of the globe. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, Matthew. And good afternoon to all South Africans that are in South Africa and South Africans abroad. Good evening, wherever you might be. Good evening or good afternoon.
We've got quite a few people joining from not only in South Korea, China as well, but there are one or two out in Malaysia and another one I see that joined in from Europe. So it's good to see that we have some people joining from across the sort of globe. Before we start, perhaps, on this webinar that we're doing this evening on alternatives to sending your money back home, the reason we're doing this webinar this evening is one of the questions that gets asked again and again is, I don't necessarily want to send my money back to South Africa, but what do I do with it? And it's very difficult to get advice living, as I know from experience, out in Asia. You never know who to turn to. Your local guy in South Africa, your financial advisor doesn't perhaps understand the tax implications or just the challenges involved. So you want some kind of independent advice, something, what can one do? And this is what led me to team up with Tisa, or Theodora, who's fairly famous from her Chat with Tisa video blogs, where she on YouTube has, I think it is over 5,000 subscribers and close to 200,000 views. Blogging or vlogging about her life in China, as well as on finances, and making things easy to understand for the everyday person out there, around the globe. So before we introduce Tisa, let me just give you a bit of information about myself, who I am, and what it is that I do. So I used to live in Asia for quite so many years. I did investments for Sanlam out in the early 2000s before deciding to pack it all up and go traveling the world, which I ended up doing for a year or two, and that ended up being 4, 5, 10, 15. And then eventually, after the birth of my daughter, I decided I have to grow up. I can't keep, just traveling. And that led me back to South Africa, where I was snatched up again by Sun and went straight back to work for them in investments, but very soon realized that because of my travels and my roots and my time abroad, what I was able to offer my clients wasn't often what you needed living abroad. You wanted something else. You wanted access that I couldn't give at Sanlam. And then eventually I was approached by quite a few international investment companies. And by the time the fourth one asked, I thought, well, let me go and have a look and see what it is. And that was Holborn Assets. And I was quite pleased and liked what I heard. So I decided to make the jump. And since then, it's been, quite a whirlwind in terms of things that one has to do and learn and study. It's pond versus the ocean. So let me give you a bit of background about Holborn. When it comes to Holborn, there are what we call the 5 pillars of why we are so successful and what has made us so successful over the past 20, sort of 30 years. And the first one is our size. We are the second largest independent global financial advisory, with just shy of $3 billion in terms of assets under management, clients in over 30 different countries, offices or licenses in over 12 different jurisdictions, with more than 20,000 different clients globally. So we truly are a global company rather than just a sort of local South African or small company. The second one is our service, and we pride ourselves on the fact that no matter where our clients are, whether you're living abroad in Asia, whether you've moved on somewhere else to Dubai or the Middle East, or you've gone on to the Mediterranean or the US, or whether you've come back to South Africa, we're able to make sure that we are in front of our clients, albeit through Zoom lately, making sure that you're always kept up to date in terms of market conditions, funds, product providers, anything that is important and that you need to be kept aware of in terms of the financial world, and so that you know what is happening within your investments and portfolio. The third one is the fact, and I like this, the fact that we are a truly independent financial advisory. And what that means is that we are not owned, nor are we incentivized by any one fund or product provider. So we can choose, who we deal with and who we do business with, based purely on merit to our clients. So, unlike a year ago, miraculously, I would have offered you a solution for the company I worked with. And likewise, if I had my Alan Gray badge or Investec badge on now, it's going to be an Alan Gray or Investec solution. Whereas now I can be truly independent, choosing from global providers across the world. And then another pillar of our success is our safety, and the fact that we don't trust any one asset or fund manager as the custodians of our clients' money. And we only place our investments or structure our investments where we know the government can back the actual investment, where they can back the actual capital. So we take the safety and security of our clients' hard-earned money very seriously. And then finally, education. You'll find that with Holborn, your wealth managers are the most qualified and best educated globally. We're all required to have, obviously, the local regular exams where we're based. So I have my RE5, for example, in South Africa. But I'm also qualified to level 3 in terms of the chartered exams in the UK. I have 2 tertiary qualifications in taxation. I have a national diploma in financial management. I have a specialized qualification in advanced financial planning, as well as estate planning and South African investments. So you'll get your local South African financial advisor, and where he is licensed and regulated and can advise on local products or offshore funds available to the local industry. He can't advise on your international investment platforms or structures because he won't have the licensing or the accreditation or even the training to be able to do so. So there's a vacuum that exists, and we exist in that space. And then finally, also, we are also from a ratings, oops, my head's in the way there. We are one of the highest rated financial advisory services globally in terms of Trustpilot. Now, that's me. So if we move on to sort of Tisa, tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do.
Well, thank you, Matthew, for that great introduction about Holborns and essentially what you are qualified to do. I didn't know, by the way, that you have so many qualifications. I didn't know that you studied so much. I mainly knew about your life abroad and that you've been living abroad for a couple of years and that you worked in the financial services sector, but I didn't know that you had so many accolades to present to us today.
I'm one of those.
So
I'm one of those
sort of
rare
getting
people
to know you a little bit more as well today.
Yeah, I enjoy tax and studying. It's yeah.
All right. So to touch base about who I am, some of you might already know who I am. I'm Theodora Ntlawini, but I go by Tessa, which is my African name. And I started my YouTube channel after moving to China. And I basically document my financial journey and my life abroad. And finances is something that I'm very passionate about. And I think anyone innately is passionate about anything that would make them money or how their money would grow, right? But it's just that access to information can sometimes be out of reach. But with the way things are lately, we have a lot of information, and sometimes we can't really verify 100% whether or not that is the next scam or that's the best advice out there. I'm not a financial advisor. Matthew is my financial advisor. So I just felt that today, let me bring Matthew, or rather work with Matthew, have Matthew bring me onto this webinar and share the information as well, because some people have been asking about my offshore investments, and I felt that I wouldn't be the best equipped person to explain that. So rather have Matthew that manages my money offshore and help me find the most suitable investment for me, be the one to explain how things work. But essentially, that's who I am, and that's more or less why we're here today.
Okay, so one of the questions that Tessa said has been come up quite a lot is the whole, if you're going to save your money, where do you save it? Should you be sending it back to South Africa, or should you be saving it offshore? So that's what I will answer first. Before I do so, we do have a poll going on in the background, which you are all welcome to take part in. It is anonymous, so no one will share any information as such in terms of that, just to get an idea of what type of audience it is that we have out there. So the question of where do you save your money? And this is something that I get asked not only from clients living abroad, but I also get asked that very regularly from clients living in South Africa who want to take their money out of the country. So I'm going to share my screen and do a whiteboard. Let me see if I can do that quickly. When it comes to, how do you choose which is the best way? Let's see, where's share?
So essentially, Matthew, before we get started with the white screen that you want to show us, I'm working abroad, right? And I'm earning a salary abroad. And the natural thing that I actually started doing, or immediately the thing that I was most excited about, was that I'm earning in renminbi because I'm in China. And when I exchange renminbi to rands, I have twice the amount and a little more. So I'm like, I'm sending my money home and I'm going to be saving in my South African bank account, or doing any sort of projects that I'm funding, or if I'm helping family out, I feel like I have a lot more money when I'm sending it back home. So that was the most natural thing to do. But after you had explained to me, or sort of brought me to enlightenment about what the effects of doing that might be, I was like, oh, so it's not only for the now, but also if I look at it in the future sense of what this means for my money that I'm sending back home, this might not be the best idea. And that's what Matthew's going to explain for us right now.
Exactly. So I'm assuming everyone can see my screen, my whiteboard at the moment. I'm not actually sure how one tells on a live webinar whether you can see me or see my screen.
We can see the screen though. Yeah.
Is it a white screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So something, as I said, something I get asked very often is, well, where, if you're going to send your money, how much do you choose? And the way I put it this way is I say, well, look at it from your own thing. It's an individual decision. It's something you need to make. It's not something I can tell you, whether you should keep your money offshore, whether you should keep your money in South Africa. So take your own, what I like to call, your gut feel. Now, if we were to sort of draw a line, whoopsie, let me rather do it that way. If we were to draw a line, and on the one end of the line, I say, let's take it on a scale of, say, 0 to 100. On the 0 end of the scale, we have what I like to call the Zimbabwe sort of, and you're going to have to excuse my spelling and my grammar as I type very quickly. If we take the Zimbabwe sort of scenario, where do you personally see South Africa going over the next 10 to 15, sort of 20 years? Where do you see the country and its future? Do you see us going on downhill, going south, the Zimbabwe sort of route, where you have sort of high corruption, perhaps with a weak rand, things have gotten a little worse, inflation, high inflation, no power, or intermittent power at least, very high unemployment. Basically, where do you see South Africa? Do you see things getting better, or do you see things getting worse? On the other end of the scale, where do you see things? Do you see things, and I like to call this the Singapore route. And the reason I use that is Singapore at one point was a lot more, or much more poorer than even in South Africa. As a nation, it was really down there, but they've managed to miraculously turn themselves around. So do you see us going that sort of route? Do you see things going better for South Africa, going that Singapore route, where, for example, the rand has improved against the dollar? We've suddenly got a stronger rand again. Do you see things where, for example, unemployment is now low? Many people have jobs. You find that inflation has gone down. Whatever your sort of level is that you use to see a success of South Africa, whether that be Zuma still in jail or whether he's out, where do you see South Africa on that sort of scale? 99% of the time, most people would put it either at a sort of, you get those who see South Africa staying around the middle, 50-50. It could get better, it could get worse. I do have the occasional clients where they see things improving. But on average, most people feel it's around a sort of 10 to 20. They don't see things getting much better for now over the next 10 to 20 years. They see things getting considerably worse. And what that effectively means, can I turn that? No. So let me do a different arrow. There we go. What that effectively means is that if you feel South Africa has a sort of a 10 slash say 20 on that scale, then it means that 80 to 90% of your savings, let's put that there, 80 to 90% of your savings should be outside of South Africa, somewhere where you can protect it against that downward trend. So if things do get worse, and it is 80 to 90% that you feel is going to go down, that money is not inside South Africa affected by that political or economical instability, where you are hedging against that. Then by all means, keep the other 10 to 20 locally. If you're of the opinion that no, you see South Africa going south, there's no hope for South Africa. I'm not that sort of person. I'm quite optimistic about South Africa, but I'm also realistic at the same time. So that answers the first question of, do you keep your money here or do you, sort of send it back home? Most clients want to try and keep it somewhere that's not in South Africa. But what else plays into that? And if I sort of clear that, I won't save it. We need to look at it also from a currency devaluation or currency depreciation sort of perspective. And this is something which, I do with every client in meetings to figure out sort of, what is the real effect of sending your money home? You want to save it somewhere. You don't know what else to do, so you're saving it in rands. Now, from an investment perspective, we're not going to go very much into the tax at the moment. But something that one does need to consider is that any investment you have in South Africa, if you've done it through a local financial advisor, there are various options. If you've got a good financial advisor, it's put you into some or other sort of linked or unit trust investment. Problem with that, though, is you are looking at 20% dividends withholding tax on terms of any growth that you get within that. You're also liable to income tax, and then you're also liable to capital gains tax at the very end of up to 18%. So, if you've grown your money, say you start off with 100,000, you've grown it to 120,000, you're not going to see the full 20,000. You would actually have gotten more, but they took the 20% dividends tax. That 120,000 now you're going to pay 18% tax on that 20% growth. But let's leave the tax out of it. The more important side of this now, really, apart from the taxes, is the actual currency. If I were to, and Tisa, since I can't ask the guests at the moment, I should have actually put that function in where I could do that. If I were to, let's take, for example, the US dollar versus the rand. And let's say we go back, most of the people on this webinar are around sort of 30 to 40 years of age. Some are still in their 20s. So one can, safely assume you're going to live at least another 30, sort of 40, 50 years. So let's say we go back to 1980 and we look back in the last 40 years. And let's take it to the end of last year. If you were to sort of compare the US dollar, let's put the US dollar at the top and the rand at the bottom. If you had to hazard a guess, just how much the rand has gone down against the dollar by over the last 40 years, what sort of amount would you guess? Just a wild estimate. What sort of guess? How much? What percentage?
Sorry, Matthew. I'm just thinking about this guess, and okay, I'm in my 20s, right? So I don't know. 40 years is a bit much, but I remember watching the news and seeing the dollar at like 7 rand. Like I was still a child when it was 7 rand. So maybe, I don't know, maybe in the 1980s it was like, I don't know, a rand, I don't know, to the dollar.
Well, in the 1980s, actually, at one stage, it was 75 cents and 80 cents to the dollar. So you could actually get more dollars than you got rands. And I remember in 2000, I think it was 2005 2004, where it was being called where the rand was called the 7-11 currency, because it was 7 rand to the dollar and 11 rand to the pound. And then at that stage, in the investment world, people were quite panicky because how far is this going to go? No one ever imagined it going up to 13, 14, certainly not up to sort of, the 17, 18 sort of levels that it was, last year.
Mhm.
But if you were to, and most people would say 40, 50%, you get those, who will say it's 600%. But in actual fact, depending on which dates to which dates you take it, you're looking at approximately 1,700 to 2,000%. Now, if I gave you an investment and I told you, Tessa, we're sitting in a coffee shop out in Shanghai somewhere, and I tell you, I have this brilliant investment for you. We're going to set up this account. It's going to be in this small little country at the bottom of Africa in rands. And over the next 40 years, you're only going to lose roughly 1,700%. Would you invest in that?
No, I wouldn't. And
And,
I wouldn't imagine that it would lose so much value as well. I would be like,
well, this is the thing. So
Mhm.
even if you feel positive that the future of the country is going well, the undeniable thing is that, unfortunately, when it comes to currency, and there's an expression in the investment world, you never invest in anything beginning with an R. So rands, rupees, rubles, reals. It is a devaluing currency, unfortunately, and that's got a lot more to do, with than just political, instability or political outlook. It's got a lot to do with GDP, inflation. There's a lot more to it. And yes, we may be able to get one or two parts of that equation correct, but you're not going to fix a depreciating currency overnight, or certainly not within one or two sort of decades. And similarly, one of the other things I often ask people is, and this is, strangely enough, I always get the exact same answer to this. Every person always chooses the same answer. They're not quite sure why, but they always choose the same answer. And rand depreciation or currency depreciation is the actual explanation of that why. And for many, I would ask them, let's say I gave you the option now, today, of there's some money in a safe. You can have that money. It's yours. And you can choose whether you want $1 million or whether you want 15 million rand. That money is going to be locked away in the safe. In 10 years' time, you can open it and you can have it. Which one would you prefer to have?
It's a bit enticing, 15 million and $1 million. And how long am I putting it away for?
10 years, and then you can have it.
Okay, I'll definitely take the $1 million. 10 years, I'm taking the $1 million. Smashe also says he'll take the dollars.
And this is the thing, everyone takes the dollars. Everyone wants the dollars. But why? And that is because if we look at it now, the rand on average depreciates at about between 7 and 9% a year. Now the thing is, yes, over the last year, it's depreciated by quite a bit more. But let's take it on let's say things are going well, and let's not go, doom and gloom, and let's say it's only 7%. What that effectively means is when you open that safe in 10 years' time, let's put that down there, in 10 years' time, it means you still have your 15 million rand. But with exchange rates, with the current exchange rate at a depreciating value of only 7%, so we're being relatively cautious here, it means that $1 million, when you exchange that, would be approximately, it'll be just shy more than 26 million rand. So everyone knows that inherently that $1 million will be worth more. And this is the explanation why. This is why. So the question, do you keep your money abroad or do you send it back home? Well, gut feel, what do you think? And then more importantly, forget about the taxes, forget about the investment opportunities and the access to global funds. Purely from a currency perspective, it just makes more sense to invest in a primary currency, something like pounds, euros, dollars, Swiss francs, or something of the likes. Let me stop sharing so I can see you again.
Okay.
There we go. Please, everyone, don't forget that we are busy running that poll in the background, so you're welcome to take part of that. Any questions, Tessa?
Um, well, when I was watching you explain that, my mind went to the thought that yes, we know that the rand will definitely keep gradually depreciating and going down, but in our minds, we're mainly thinking, well, if it depreciates, it means that when I send money home, I have more money. So why wouldn't I just send money home and have more money? You know? But then also, I know that the US dollar is a strong currency, the pound is a strong currency, but I'm not necessarily thinking about saving or keeping my money in that currency because I'm like, where do I even begin? Where do I buy dollars and keep them, I don't know, with me somewhere in my cupboard in China? Even if I get like into an investment, how do I even trust that that investment is legit? And when I want access to my money, will I have it? Can I have it maybe if I'm in South Africa one day and I want that money back? Can I get that money? Will it be difficult now? Will I have to now fly to America or to the UK to try and fight for my money to get it back? So there's that anxiety, but then there's also that thought of I live in South Africa, and I'm working abroad and I'm earning in this currency. So when I send my money to South Africa, I definitely have more. But also that's just like thinking for the now, not necessarily thinking for the future, because if you look at it in the future, you actually were not really making that much money by doing that. Yeah.
And that is exactly, that's the same as the whole safe. Do you send that $100 back now and get 15 Rand for it? Or do you send that $100 back in 10 years' time and get sort of, 260 sort of Rand or whatever it is for it? So instead of the 15, you get 26 later on. So you have, because of time value of money and depreciating currency, you will end up with a lot more money later on. But what do you do with it? No, do you keep it under your mattress? That is an option, and for some, there are people who prefer to do that. So this leads us to the next part, and then in terms of, well, what do you do? If you are going to keep your money offshore, what do you do? Well, one of the questions I often get asked as well is, I want to set up an offshore bank account. Surprise, if you're living offshore, you already have an offshore bank account, more than likely either in China or in Korea or in Taiwan, but you have an offshore bank account. And many of those bank accounts will allow you to hold a primary currency, a US dollar account, for example. But putting your money just into cash obviously allows it to be eroded through inflation, and this is something that is very important. Even in your local investments, where you get your investment returns, you get what's called a real return. And that is your return, the money you're making after inflation. And the simple way to think of it, if you're keeping your money in the bank and you're just getting 1 or 2% interest, but things are becoming 3 or 4% more expensive every year, then even though you've grown by 1 or 2%, if things are 3 or 4% more expensive, you've actually lost 2% in terms of your money, your actual purchasing power. And that's why it's very important to be able to invest your money into something that then matches your risk profile, something where you can say, I'm a cautious sort of person. I want some form of protection, but I also want to be able to do some sort of growth. So what kind of investment do I go into? And this is where a company like Holborn is very different to the local sort of sphere. There is no one solution. Everything is built like Lego, because you, Tessa, out in China, have different ambitions, goals, plans, what it is you want to be able to do, when you want to be able to be financially independent, or whether you want to set up a business. And those goals will be different to every other person out there. So part of our job and my job as a wealth manager is in matching your goals and what it is you want to be able to do with your money to an investment, whether that be property somewhere out in the US, for example, or whether it's property in the UK or Germany, or something out in Portugal or in the Bahamas, something that'll get you a passport, or whether that's going to be investment funds or ETFs, or whether it's going to sort of be, there's a whole range of things that one can add into that sort of investments. And that's where my job as a wealth manager then comes in, saying, right, this is your goal. This is what you want to do. You want to be able to access it. You plan on maybe moving to that country afterwards, or you plan on moving here. You may one day very well come back. So you want to be able to access it no matter where you are in the world. And I think of it, and I often speak of it as your sort of global suitcase for your money. You want something that I believe has portability. And so my job as a wealth manager is to then go out and say, right, if we these are your needs and these are your goals, and this is the nice benefit of being independent. Where do we do that? With which company do we do that? In which country will that be? What is going to get me the benefits that you require, the safety, the security that you need? And match all of that into a product, which we then build up and say, right, this is who we believe will be the best fit for you. Not just because that's the company I work for. And it won't be like, often with your local companies, I work for this company, so I'm, entitled, or I need to be advising you on these funds that are with my company. I can put you with any fund, that I like globally, including South African funds for those who feel that way. But when you're saving in a primary currency, most people don't want to do that. They want their money to sort of grow. They want to keep their money outside of South Africa. Yes.
So, sorry, Matthew, to butt in, but I wanted to add on that point, what I liked about the consultation that you and I had about over a year ago was that you were not necessarily selling to me a Holborn product. It wasn't like invest with Holborn and buy and put your money in this fund, which is a Holborn fund per se, but rather we went through a variety of different funds with different companies, and you found one that was suitable for me and also cost effective as well. So that's what I liked, compared to if I was investing in South Africa and I'm speaking to someone who works at company X, they can only sell me a product that is from company X and that adds to their sales. And at the end of the day, even if they feel like this is not necessarily suitable for me, they would still sell me that product because they work for that company. So what I did like about Holborns is that you're not buying into Holborns, but rather you are the one that works there, but then you have access to so many different funds that you go out there and find for someone that would be best suited for them. So
Exactly.
yeah,
and that's
so
it. There is no
one thing I
Holborn
really
fund.
liked.
There is no Holborn fund. My job is to, and that's the nice thing about working for an international. I have access to literally global companies, investment funds, and different types of investments. And this is the thing, working in the local industry, you want to get into property, I can put you into a property fund. With Holborn, if you want to get into property and you have the right sort of money, well, let's buy you some property and put that as part of your portfolio. We can even get you pre-developed land in the US, for example. There's just so much more that one can put towards that picture. Again, in a primary currency, so that at least that way you're not losing 7 to 9% in terms of value just because you've got it in rands. So from that perspective, it's global. There's no one solution fits all. And this is the thing, some of the questions I'll be asked very often is costs. What are the costs? Well, I don't know up front, because I don't know what you actually need. I don't know whether you actually are going to end up going down the property route. I don't know whether you're going to end up going a fund route. I don't know whether you're going to end up going a citizenship by investment sort of route. And all those have different types of funds and fees. And if we're going an investment fund route, well, I don't know whether we're going to be structuring your investment out of the UK, for example, or through the US or the Bahamas, or through the Isle of Man. I don't know sort of what type of product you're going to, and that all is part of the conversation that comes around building an investment that is cost effective and suitable for you. Ultimately, on all the clients that I have advised and gone through versus when I was at Sunlam, it has been a lot more cost effective than going through the local market. In terms of access, one of the questions you asked, I was just thinking about that quickly. The one thing I do like about your international funds and your international product providers and platforms is that you do have access globally. And you can have more than one currency. You might want pounds as well as euros, or as well as dollars. You might want, all three of them in one investment to be able to hedge yourself, not keep all your eggs in one basket. And that is entirely possible. Come the day you need access to it, well, it's as simple as, completing an application form or completing the form to say you want to withdraw your money. And that can be paid out to you literally anywhere in the world. It's not like the local industry where you need a South African bank account and they'll pay that money out to your South African bank account. Or there's huge headaches trying to get access to that sort of money. If you move from Korea or from China to Saudi Arabia, it's entirely, there's no difference because you've moved anywhere. It's a global investment or global sort of, as I said earlier, suitcase to your money.
We
Any other
have a
questions?
question. We have a
Yes.
question from Svatle. She has a question. Svatle says, could I ask what are the laws associated with keeping money in other countries? I'm South African. Legally, what are the laws and guidelines associated with offshore accounts?
Okay, so we will have a Q&A section at the end, but since this is actually quite a good question, I'm going to answer that now in the meantime.
Okay.
So, something that many people don't really realize or don't often know is that, technically speaking, from a South African sort of perspective, it is illegal to have money outside of South Africa if you are South African. Having said that, there are certain exemptions, and that is the key. There are certain exemptions within our law that allows you to have money outside and send money outside of the country. The problem is, though, that obviously those exemptions can be repealed at any stage, and then the government can make it illegal for you to have your money abroad, and then they can force you to bring that money back to South Africa. And one of the things that when it comes to that is when we do set up investments, one of the key things that I found, and I make sure I do that with all my clients, is talk about things such as how important is it, especially for those who are saving their money offshore and those who've saved up large sums. They don't plan on coming back to South Africa, and the last thing they want is for their money to be forcefully repatriated back to South Africa, even though they're not coming back. And that is something that can happen. In 2015, I believe it was, Sanlam was forced to repatriate some of their clients' money back to South Africa. So there is precedence for that. So as it stands now, there are certain exemptions in law which allow you to have money outside of South Africa. You can keep your money in a bank account offshore. There's no problem with that whatsoever. The bigger thing is, though, that you are required to, if you are a South African tax resident, to obviously declare any growth or income on that money outside of South Africa. So you do need to obviously declare that inside South Africa if you are a tax resident inside South Africa. But most people on this call this evening will more than likely be tax resident either somewhere in Asia or somewhere in Europe. And there are different dual tax treaties involved there, which sort of make differences towards that. So yeah, no worries in terms of having your money outside of South Africa and keeping it outside of South Africa, none whatsoever. If you move back to South Africa and you're a tax resident here, then you will have to declare the fact that you do have that money there. Any income that you earn on that or any interest that you earn, you would have to declare on that.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else, Tisa? One of the things that I just want to quickly add to that, since we were talking about that, I know you and I spoke about this, is the whole tax in terms of offshore versus South African tax, in terms of tax residency and your expat taxes, because there's been a lot of misconception around that. Mm-hmm. If you are a tax resident in South Africa, you're registered for tax inside South Africa, this is the place you come back to on a continuous sort of basis. Then any income you earn more than 1.25 million, they can tax you on inside South Africa, even though you're living abroad and even though you've been living abroad for sort of many years. If you are registered for tax in South Africa and you're a tax resident here, then that can happen. They can tax you on that. But most or quite a few of the clients that we have, especially out in China and Asia, are below that sort of threshold. So there's no need to worry about that. And anything else? What are the other big questions that you often get asked, Tisa?
I think people don't really know what products are available offshore, either than not knowing which company to go with that can be trusted. I think people also don't necessarily know which products are available to them. I mean, even locally, we don't really know what kind of products are available to us. We just sort of can associate, oh, this company, that company, they do investments, or I should have a retirement plan, etc. So if I wanted to save for retirement, like if I know that I'm going to be abroad indefinitely, like I don't necessarily have a set time that I'm like, I'm going to be in South Africa at this time, but I want to be abroad, whether it be China or any other country where I can work and earn an income. I would like to save for my retirement. I want to be able to retire whether in South Africa or in another country, but have enough money to take care of myself during retirement. So are there retirement options? And when I do retire, like, am I going to be subjected to the same rules like in South Africa, where I have sort of like a retirement annuity and I can only take out a certain portion of that money, even though maybe my retirement is offshore? And okay, the second part of the question is sort of like, if I now invested offshore and then I move back to South Africa, what then happens to that offshore investment?
Okay, that's quite a good question, and I'll answer that in two parts as well. The first one is, again, what products are available? There are, and this is now where things become, again, very different to the local industry. Just using that example of retirement or savings for pensions. Now, the first thing that's very important to remember is that often your Asian countries don't have government pensions that South Africans belong to. And this is a very important thing, because if you were back home, you'd be paying on average between 14 and up to 27% in terms of your income on pension or retirement savings. Now, that money that goes into either your pension at work, or if you're saving towards a retirement annuity, or let's say you're sending money back to South Africa to fund your retirement in a retirement annuity, that money is essentially locked away until age 55 at the very earliest. At that age, you're only allowed to take out 1/3. The rest you have to take an income from in the form of a pension, and that is taxed as income every month for the rest of your life. Now, if I was still working in the local industry and you asked me this question a year ago, well, I have only one choice, and that is either a tax-free savings or retirement annuity. Now, with the tax-free savings, it's not quite as beneficial as a retirement annuity. There are differences to the two options. 99% of the time, your financial advisor is going to put you into a retirement annuity. The problem with that is that money's locked away. Now, let's say, for example, you reach age 50 and you want to retire early because you're able to. You can't do that with a retirement annuity. Let's say you've reached age 55 or you're now 60. You cannot, or it's getting a lot more difficult to find a job in Asia as a teacher. You now want to sort of go and buy a house somewhere and settle down and use what little savings you have left as an income. Well, you can't do that because you can only access your 1/3, and that probably won't be enough to buy a house and then with the other 2/3 for an income. Whereas at least with your international options, with the offshore investment, those options, well, you can structure it as and how you like. You can set up an offshore pension, one which will allow you to gain access earlier if you need to, if you decide to retire earlier. It'll also be, one where when you finally do retire, well, you can take whatever amount as the lump sum and decide how you want to spend the remaining amount, what kind of income, how you want to invest it. There'll also be no investment restrictions, so you won't have to deal with things such as Regulation 28 or Section 65, where the South African government or the FSCA dictates to you what you may or may not invest in, what percentages, for example, you may invest in. So at least you have a lot more control over your own investment offshore. You have more access to your money, or better access to your money. And that money can be paid out anywhere. You don't have to take it as a pension inside South Africa. You could decide you want to purchase a pension if that is your option. But having the money paid out in the Bahamas, if you've ended up there one day, or let's say halfway along the line, part of your retirement plans is to retire on the beach somewhere in Europe. Well, then use part of that money that you've been building up to purchase a property or put down a deposit in a property and buy something somewhere in like Portugal or one of the other countries which offers a citizenship by investment. To secure yourself a passport where you can then go and live on the beach somewhere in Europe or in the Caribbean somewhere. But you have so much more available to you. There are lots of different ways that one can actually structure that to get you what you need, when you need, and have flexibility. Whereas South Africa, for example, if you've gone into a retirement annuity, it's age 55 at the earliest, 1/3, 2/3, and the government will tell you how and what funds you may use when it comes to investing within that. So that's quite different. Whereas offshore, more flexibility, and if done correctly, one can structure that income later on to be a lot more tax efficient, so you don't pay income tax on that.
All right. You know, Matthew, when you refer to like the Bahamas or retiring somewhere at the beach and buying property, in my mind, I'm like, how much money would I need? How long would I need to invest for? Like, is it something that I can even, like, with the salary that I have right now, which is definitely a lot more than what I would earn in South Africa? But how feasible is this? How realistic is it for me to even have these opportunities of that level of financial freedom?
Well,
So
it's
with you already know how much I earn, more or
mm,
less, because you're my financial advisor. But looking at someone like me, right, and looking at how much I put away, like how feasible is that sort of retirement lifestyle? Because yes, retirement sounds like something so far away, but it's something that you have to start saving for very early on. And in your 20s, mid 20s, late 20s is still kind of seen as late. People are starting really early with their retirement savings. So, me having started last year and you know, me saying I'll stay indefinitely, and let's assume that I'll keep earning what I'm earning and maybe a little more, and putting away the amount that I put away, of which maybe some people might be able to fall under the same bracket without putting out any numbers. How feasible is that? And if I wanted to start, if I hadn't started whatsoever and I wanted to start today, in order for me to have that lifestyle, how much would I actually need to start with? Yeah.
well, I like to call it, first of all, in terms of retirement, I like to call it FIRE because some people like to become financially independent and retire early. Be able to choose
Fire.
whether they want to work and how they work. And there's quite a large FIRE sort of following in terms of the internet. Well, it obviously depends on at what ages you want to be able to be financially independent. I've had some clients in the very early 20s who want to be financially independent by age 40. And one particular client that I was dealing with, it is entirely possible, but he's the exception to the rule. He is extremely motivated and he knows what he wants. He knows how he wants to get there. And he will, I'm 100% confident he actually will be able to get there because that's just the way he is. His parents are amazed that he's like that. They don't believe he's that disciplined, but he is. So it depends on what age and how much you're actually willing to save or put away. Some people prefer to travel right now and not save so much. And obviously, then you can't expect to become financially independent early on. That's going to take a lot longer. So it depends what age you are now, what sort of level income you're going to need eventually, where it is you plan to end up becoming financially independent or living one day. Obviously, if you're going to end up living off the coast in Europe, for example, it's going to probably cost you a lot more than if you're going to end up living off the coast of Panama, for example, or some Caribbean island, or whether you end up deciding that Asia is actually the spot for you. You want to be able to become financially independent and go and retire in, or go and live in Thailand. So it depends on where you want to be, what sort of age you are, what sort of amounts you want to be able to save, how, what your own finances are. For someone like yourself, and I know obviously because of your finances and just setting up your things, like for TISA, if I may share this, part of TISA's planning is actually property investment, one that'll lead to citizenship by investment in the next sort of 10 years. And then also we have alongside that a more longer term one to cover the income to be able to pay for when she's living somewhere abroad. And a lot of the time, that's what I will do. Again, no one size fits all. Some of the times, that's not what everyone wants. So it depends on what age you want, where you want. There's quite a bit that goes into that. I see. I just want to be conscious of the time that we don't take sort of too long because we've gone from 2:30 South African time to nearly 3:30, which is close to 10:30 in Korea.
Yeah.
So, any other big questions, Tisa? Otherwise, maybe we should start some of the Q&A and look at some of the questions that are coming in then.
Yeah, sure. I think we should go into the Q&A section. Would you like me to read the questions?
Let's see. Yes, bring up some of the questions that you have, and then we'll answer them live.
Okay, there's a question here from Barbara, and Barbara is saying, is one able to have an offshore bank account that works as a regular bank account, like having instant access to that money as well?
And this is a question I do get asked quite often by people living abroad. And well, if you're living in China, for example, you probably have a Chinese bank account, which is an offshore bank account, which works like an offshore bank account. The only reason you see it as a local bank account is because you're not in South Africa. You are already living in an offshore country. The same with your Korean bank accounts, same with your bank accounts in Poland, your UK bank accounts. So yes, in terms of a bank account that's offshore working like a bank account, that is the bank account you have right now. All you need to do is make sure, if you want to not have it in Korean won or renminbi, then you need to just open up, for example, one of the US dollar accounts with the bank that you're, if the bank you're with offers that sort of that service, and then you have a bank account linked to your bank card that you can withdraw money from.
But could I have a bank account in another country without me being there?
It's a lot more difficult nowadays to be able to do that. Because of FICA and anti-money laundering laws, it's not very easy to set up an offshore bank account unless you are actually in that actual country. So for someone, for example, who's been living in Asia and who's set up their account there, and you've got a dollar account, and you've set it up correctly, and you've made sure that you have global access to it. In other words, they've given you a proper global card, not just a local card. Then you have an offshore account that you can use. Then you don't need to. One can always, if you want to, afterwards set up one with FNB in the Isle of Man or Standard Bank Isle of Man or one of those sorts of accounts. The important thing to remember there, though, is that they are still South African linked bank accounts. They still fall under the jurisdiction of South Africa. In terms of South Africa being the parent company. For example, for Standard Bank Isle of Man, they're owned by Standard Bank South Africa.
Oh, okay. All right. And we have another question. Barbara, we hope that answers your question. Bronwyn says, for South Africans who are working in Asia, what are the best choice of investment opportunities for 2021, 2022?
So there again, and this is why when it comes to investments, a lot of this is very much individual Lego blocks. Because what are the best opportunities for 2021, 2022? What do you aim to use that money for? Do you only aim to save it for 1 or 2 years? What are the sort of risks that you can take with that money? Are you going to need that money in 1 or 2 years' time? Because if so, then you probably shouldn't be putting into anything risky. You should probably be putting into something that's relatively cautious, where you're not going to end up in some kind of trouble later on because, well, you've invested into some or other infrastructure and now the market is not doing particularly well at that time, but you need the money. So what do you do? So there, that involves an in-depth conversation. A, what is the money earmarked for? B, what is your risk profile? What are you planning? What's the length of time that you plan to save it for? If you're only going to plan to save for 1 or 2 years, then my honest advice would be to rather keep it in a primary currency in a bank account, not take anything very risky with that. You could put into a fixed deposit or fixed income, government bonds or something, but short term. Do you only plan to save it for 2 years? In which case, then you're probably not looking for high risk sort of income investment opportunities.
Yeah, and what I like about the time when you and I started is that you did the suitability report, and to be honest with you, my expectations was that we're gonna talk for that day, and then tomorrow or in about a week or 3 days or so, that everything would be set up. So I was very surprised when we kept going back and forth about which investment was most suitable for me and how that also needed to be approved by your superiors. So that made me actually feel more secure that I'm getting something that will definitely suit everything that you and I had discussed regarding my goals and my plans. So I like the fact that you've emphasized that it's not a one size fits all. So what Tissa is invested in and how her investment is set up will definitely not be the same as your next client, even if we're working in the same country and with the same age. Everybody's goals are different. I'm more of a long-term investor. Short-term, I have my emergency fund for that, which is in renminbi and in South African rands, because things could happen at home, things could happen while I'm here. But then I also want to have my long-term investments that I know I cannot touch. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's it. The first step is always your emergency fund. And then, yes, as you said earlier, there's a lot of due diligence. You know, when you're working with a company like ours that does international, there's a lot of due diligence that goes into the companies that we are willing to put your money into, or put your investments with. So there's a lot that goes into that. I see Monet Chur has asked a question, you know, what is the advice regarding lump sums versus monthly contributions? If you don't invest a lump sum and only have monthly contributions, can you diversify for a 5 or 10-year savings plan for a pension as well? And this is the nice thing about being able to build blocks like Lego. There are two schools of thought here. You know, when it comes to lump sum, do you put a large amount of money in now, or do you put it in monthly? That's the one side. The other side is, well, do you just put money in monthly, or save up and then put a large lump sum in at the end? There is a concept that we refer to in the investment world called dollar cost averaging. And, you know, most of the time, by using monthly contributions, instead of trying to time the market and get in at the right time, it means that you're playing, you know, you're depositing money throughout the entire, as the markets go up and down, you're depositing money throughout that entire cycle. And what that means is, for example, if you are saving, it means that when funds are doing well, yes, it's costing you slightly more to go into it. But imagine you put your whole lump sum in when funds were doing well, and then it starts going down the hill again. You could have been saving money by getting those same funds at a cheaper rate if you just waited a little bit. So do you keep your lump sum? Or, you know, and that becomes the problem with lump sums. Whereas with monthly contributions or quarterly contributions, it means that you can sort of try, instead of timing the market, get in as the markets go up and down. So you benefit from when the markets are lower, in that you get things at a cheaper price, and you have more in your basket when markets start going up that increase in value at the same time. And so the logic behind that, or the methodology behind that, is dollar cost averaging. And it basically, it means that you will be better off by using monthly contributions rather than lump sum ones. It becomes a little more complicated than that, but that's as easy as I'm able to make it sound for now. And then, yes, can you diversify for a 5 or 10-year savings plan? Yes, you can. You can diversify. Again, what is your risk profile? Some people, you know, I want to save for 5 years, I want to save for 10 years, some I want to pay for 20 years, some the aim is pension, some the aim is property, some I'm not quite sure yet. You know, so depending on the term and depending on your risk profile, that would determine, well, what kind of risk can you take. But always, irrespective of your risk, even if you're the most cautious person out there, you would still diversify. Mainly, and this is one thing that I always advise clients against, you don't want to be the all your eggs in one basket person. You know, not only from a geographic point of view, you know, you've got all your money saved up in South Africa, things go south, the rand plummets or goes, you know, something goes wrong, a change in president or Reserve Bank governor, and it affects the value. Everything is in that basket. So you want to be able to diversify. Let's say, for example, you've got all your money in some North American investment, and things start going south there. Again, either because of change in president or because of market conditions. Imagine the financial crisis. You know, you don't want all your money in one basket. So you diversify either way, even if you are cautious. You diversify in terms of geographic location. You don't put all your money in one area. You certainly also don't diversify into only one currency. You know, you use 2 or 3 different currencies, perhaps some into pounds, some to dollars, some to euros. And you also diversify across your sort of asset classes. Not everything into tech, because tech is doing quite well at the moment, or everything into property because I'm extremely cautious, or everything into cash. You need to sort of, you know, diversify effectively in terms of getting a balance of that, so that you're able to smoothly ride with the markets rather than be overly subjected to any one market condition at a time. So
to
hopefully
add
that
to that
answers.
point, Matthew, about diversification in a retirement fund is that, for example, with a South African retirement fund, like you said, there are those rules and regulations that would effectively affect where some of your money can go. So only a certain percentage of your money can go offshore,
That's
and
right.
majority of it is remaining in South African based investments, which then closes you off to the opportunities that you might have offshore, right?
Well, this is it, yes. And I was speaking to the CEO of Capital International Group a few weeks back, and he put it this way, in that South Africa makes up 0.4% of the global economy. Now, when it comes to investment funds, and this is something I am able to now speak to you about because you are not resident in South Africa. All my clients are resident outside, so I can advise you on that. I cannot give that same advice to people living inside South Africa, and that is a very important distinction to make. So the funds that I, for example, can put you into, Tessa, I cannot put my South African clients into because they are subject to regulations in South Africa that will not allow that inside South Africa. They have, in South Africa, there are approximately 1,500 different funds which one can invest in. And that includes the offshore funds available to South Africans. Globally, though, there are over 55,000 different investment funds available. So it's literally like swimming in a pond versus swimming in an ocean. So part of the benefit that you have living abroad and being able to set up your offshore investments, your savings, your pensions abroad, means that you do have unrestricted access to literally the entire globe, not just to what the South African government feels you should or shouldn't be investing in.
All right. I have quite a number of questions on my end as well. The Q&A section has quite a number of questions. So we have another one from Monet. What is your advice regarding investing?
So that's the lump sum.
Oh, you've answered that one. Okay.
Yeah, so I've answered that one live. And then I see there's a question here from Scott.
Okay.
Scott Kearney, can you explain the fee structure? How does Holborn get paid after the service it provides its clients? So one of the things that I do when it comes to clients is when you set up an investment, same as in the local industry. In the local industry, when anyone sets up any kind of investment for a client, you get paid an upfront commission and an ongoing commission. Now, in the international sort of sphere, depending on which company and what type of investment it is, because obviously it depends on what we're going to do. But with many of them, the actual provider or the platform may provide some kind of upfront sort of commission. And that is generally, what they would then pay over to Holborn. And usually that's around 1%, of which 0.4 to 0.6% is what gets paid to Holborn. That's what the provider would charge you. And out of that, that's where I would then get my commission. I don't charge an ongoing management fee. I say, well, let's target a return. So, I'm setting up an investment for you. Let's see, you want to be able to get X amount as a return in a primary currency. So let's see if we can do that. And then what I normally do is after 2 years, there I would then say, okay, well, Tessa, we wanted this percentage return. I've been able to get you this for the last 2 years. So now I feel it's fair for me to now start charging you a management fee of, say, 0.5%. So that is how, I get my money afterwards in terms of the actual ongoing managing for the rest of our lives together.
All right. Just
so
to also add to that, to add to the fairness of that, I will say that with you, Matthew, I have had a lot of tutoring and teaching when I don't understand something, when we do have a meeting together regarding my investments, you've been able to explain things in a very thorough manner, and I've had access to you, which is something that locally in South Africa, to be honest, if you wanted to call about your investments, you will either get a different person to the person who signed you up, okay? And B, they probably won't have time to explain some of the nitty-gritty stuff that you might have questions about. That all does take time. And it's only fair that you would get money for that. And I like also what you explained regarding my investment and how much I would be charged, that the percentage applied would not necessarily be on the, for example, if I was invested for 10 years, for example, it wouldn't be charged on the earnings of 10 years, but rather in the earnings of the first 2 years. So that was with my particular investment. So I liked that about that.
Yeah.
So
well, that's the thing. You get different charging instructions for the different types of investments and different platforms, and there it depends generally on what is best for you. On average, though, if you were to look at it, a good thumb suck or rule of thumb would be to say that you're usually looking at about 1% as the effective cost for an investment. And there, again, I don't charge an extra advice fee or management fee, not until I've been able to prove at least 2 years down the line that I can actually provide what I say I can. I see Musa's asked, what's a good starting amount? This is the other thing. Unlike your local investments, obviously international platforms are quite a bit more expensive in that from a monthly, if you want to save on a monthly basis, you're looking at least a minimum of about $300. When it looks at lump sums, depending if you want to do a combination of a lump sum and monthly, then that's different. You're still looking at 300 monthly, but the lump sum can be, as little as say $10,000 or $5,000. If you're looking at lump sum only, though, then it's very different in that you're looking at needing around $50,000, and that's generally not what most South Africans have. I've got quite a large client base that do have a lot more than that. But on average, the most people in Korea or in China or in Taiwan, for example, tend to go the monthly sort of route rather than the sort of the lump sum route. So that's answered live.
okay.
I understand it differs based on your goals, but what's the lowest amount? Okay, so there again, that's that one. What percentage goes to Holborn? So depending obviously on the type of investment and what kind of structure it is it property? Is it, there's so much there, and that's why it makes that very difficult. But generally your sort of, your lump sum sort of savings, it's generally around 1%. How does one go about setting up a trust fund through Holborn? Well, there, obviously, if you're going to be setting up a trust, there are different trust fees, and there, where do we set up that trust? Do we set up that trust in South Africa? Do you want that trust to be in a tax-free jurisdiction like Guernsey? Do you want it to be somewhere in the Isle of Man, for example? What is the reason for the trust? Who are the beneficiaries going to be? So that can be. Ken, that can be quite. Sorry, I just saw another question regarding Bitcoin, which always sort of delights me. However, I am still sitting in South Africa, and so I, have to be cognizant of the laws of where I am based at the moment. So I'll send out an individual message to that person about that. Offshore, though, obviously, if you're living abroad and you're not inside South Africa, you obviously may invest in whatever you feel. Do you have to be registered with Sars to invest offshore? No. You do not need to be registered with Sars to invest offshore. The investments that I set up are not based in South Africa. They're also not set up in South Africa. They're set up abroad. And as long as you can prove that you are not living in South Africa, then that's not a problem. How does one set up a consultation with Holborn? You're more than welcome to. After this the webinar, there will be an email that will be sent out in the next day or two to all participants who did participate, along with a link for the recording. And then you are more than welcome to reach out to me either through Facebook or through WeChat or Kakao Talk or WhatsApp. But I will share my details with you. I will get Taylor to reach out to everyone just to share my information. Okay, any other questions? I'm just a little cognizant of the time that is getting fairly late on that side. Tisa, any questions that you feel are very important that we need to answer now? We will make sure we email everyone afterwards in terms of the questions that they do have that we haven't answered.
I think Gugu's question, do you think it would be wise to cancel my current retirement fund in South Africa, which includes an endowment, since I'm not planning to be abroad long term, at least not in China?
Okay, so the reason for the eyes, I saw the word endowment. Well, one needs to look at it from this. If you're only going to be there for a year or two, then I would say no, continue with it. But if you plan on being abroad for a longer term, then yes, it makes sense to, from the currency depreciation side of it alone, as well as the choice in terms of investment funds, it makes sense to rather just save your money offshore in something that's specifically for that need. If you're in an endowment, depending on how much money you have in your endowment, the problem is, and this is where you get a local financial advisor who doesn't understand the nuances of cross-border financial planning. Let's say you're out in South Korea where you're paying roughly 3% tax. Let's say you're out in the Middle East where you're not paying any taxes. An endowment is taxed differently to a linked investment, for example, a LISP, otherwise what they call it, or unit trust. With a unit trust or linked investment, they're going to charge you 20% dividends tax. The income tax you are required to declare yourself and pay tax on. And they're going to charge you up to 18% capital gains tax. With an endowment, things are different. They will charge you the same 20% dividends tax, but they will charge you income tax at a fixed rate of 30%. Now, that means any growth or income within that fund, within your endowment that's building up, they're automatically deducting 30% tax from every year. Why would you want to pay 30% tax if you're out in, let's say, Korea, where you're only paying 3% tax? Why would you want to be paying 30% tax when you're out in China, for example? You're not resident in South Africa and your tax rate in South Africa is 0. You're paying way more taxes than you need to be paying. Unfortunately, an endowment is a good savings option for someone inside South Africa who is in a tax bracket of, say, 36 or 45%. Most of us out in Asia are not tax residents in South Africa paying 45 or 36% taxes. So therefore, you're paying more money for your growth. And I had this case literally 2 weeks ago, a client who had about 600,000 inside an endowment inside South Africa, paying huge amounts of taxes each year for something that she did not need to be paying. But because of the structure, had she just rather put that into a linked investment, things would have been a lot better for her. Had she just structured it through, for example, the Isle of Man, she'd be paying no taxes. So, and this is something that one needs to be cognizant of when you're dealing with people who are not inside South Africa.
All right.
Okay, I think we'll make that the last question. I did say, no, you don't need to be registered as Sars to offshore. What are other long-term investments that you have besides retirement? Well, literally anything. Property. You could buy property in Germany. You could buy pre-developed property or land development in the US. You could buy a citizenship by investment. You could buy a platform, an investment platform, and hold a car or art if you want. The scope is just huge. Okay, that's all those questions answered. Tisa, thank you so much for your time this evening. And I look forward to speaking to you again and perhaps doing this again in the future.
That would be great. Thank you very much for having me. And I really felt that this would have been beneficial for a lot of South Africans that are abroad and want to add more value to their investments and know what is out there for them, what opportunities they have outside of just sending money home. So thank you so much for availing yourself, Matthew. I'm sure you'll definitely have a lot of questions from people. So good luck to you and Taylor.
Okay, and I will be speaking to you again, Tessa. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you to everyone for joining, and hope you have a good evening on your side of the planet.